You're listening to the Becoming Zesty Podcast. We are Megan and Dr. Alex, and we're so happy that you're here.
We are passionate about accelerated transformation, yours, ours, and the collective.
Personal and professional for coaches, practitioners, and leaders of all kinds.
Between the two of us, we seem to have done things the painful way. So let our pitfalls become your stepping stones. We are not afraid to share our raw and vulnerable truths in order to help you transform your thinking, your body, your heart, and your soul.
Combining over 15 years of functional medicine with brain-based habit change to lead you to create the life of your dreams, supporting yourself through all four bodies, physical, mental, emotional, and energetic, every step of the way.
We are transformation accelerators, wholeness cultivators, empowerment experts, speakers, authors, mentors, and change makers for a more loving world. By combining Dr. Alex's MD experiences
with Megan's mindset magic, we've helped hundreds of thousands of people transform their lives, and we can help you too. If you're ready to accelerate your transformation and have so much fun doing it, then stick around. We've got you covered. Quick reminder, this information is not meant to diagnose, manage, or treat disease. Always consult with your doctor, not this doctor, before making changes. Now let's get into today's episode.
Welcome, everybody. Welcome back to the Zesty Podcast. Dr. Alex and I am here today. Hey, Dr. Alex.
Hello. How are you all doing? Thank you for being here with us.
We love when we get to do this together. It's super duper fun for us. And we have lots of big announcements today. We're going to take you on a journey. We're going to take you on a journey through the life of Megan and Alex because we are here celebrating a complete rebrand of the old Zesty Ginger, which is now Becoming Zesty. And Zesty is the part we're focusing on because our goal is to give coaches, people, practitioners tools so they can be zesty in their life every day, all the time, and help other people do the same. So we're super excited. We've got new website. We've got new podcast name, new podcast cover, new Instagram. Everything has gone over to becomingzesty.com. And it represents, visually, it represents us a little different. What it really represents, though, for us is the much bigger picture, a much bigger picture of where we're going and what we're doing, what our company is about, and how we want to expand, we have a really big vision of actually changing medicine, coaching, NLP, all the worlds. We're coming for them. And we'll get into that more today. But first, we wanted to make sure you're aware that we're in the middle of our amazing Success Habits series. We have already done 2 parts. So thank you to everybody who's been there live. Thank you to everybody who's sharing in the Facebook group. You all are rock stars. We love the energy in there. We love what you're doing. If you have not watched those yet, you still have time. This is our free 3-part series that we only do twice a year. So go on over to becomingzesty.com/success and do a little binging on part 1 and 2 because tomorrow part 3 comes out.
Yeah.
And you don't want to miss it. Lots
Absolutely.
of good stuff there.
Yeah. So success habits for coaches, leaders, practitioners. If that's you, come on over. You don't want to miss out on the stuff that we're covering there because it's really going to transform how you look and view habits and business.
Yes. So things that you can actually take home and do right away. We want you to take action. We want you to implement things. We want you to be sharing your wins in real time. We have some toward motivation. We have some cool prizes for helping people to get excited about rewiring their brain instead of going away from all the stuff they don't want. We're going to help remind you that you can choose the new identity in the future you want. You can choose the new habits you want and go towards them. Pretty fun.
And that even includes a little negotiating with yourself and figuring out all sorts of stuff coming up. So it's good stuff. Check it out. Come on over. We'll be hanging out tomorrow. And in the meantime, though, for this episode, I think we're going to get on our little time machine.
I thought it would be fun to just kind of go through how this all happened, how we met, how we got here, and where we are going. Because it's changed drastically in a really short period of time, to be honest. So we're going to go back, 10 years? What has it been?
Mm-hmm.
We're going to go back 10 years to when we met. Take it away, Alex.
Yep. So first stop is 10 years ago. We met online. We met on Instagram. And, it's funny when people see us now, they're like, oh, well, you guys know each other so well. And you must have, I think people assume that there was like a history there or whatever previously. But honestly, there really wasn't. This is one of those like magical lineups where to us, it's a collaborative life experience because part of it's setting what we want, and then sometimes magic shows up and things just click. So that's kind of what happened, in that we have emails from running into each other repeatedly on Instagram. Basically, what had happened was that we were building our businesses. We were early. I mean, Megan actually had a business. I basically had a hobby. I was in med school. I was blogging. I was doing all that stuff, but I really wasn't monetizing it too much. And then Megan had coaching clients, but not so much in the like programs or that kind of thing. And since there was plans for future changes like babies and things like that, you were in the space to be thinking ahead and being like, does hourly pay does basically self-employment rather than a business fit here. So that was all unsaid, but here we are on Instagram just commenting on people's stuff and interacting and doing the businessy stuff that we all know and love and do. So,
and this is back, Alex, I was thinking about this. This is back when Instagram actually felt like a small community, because there were, I don't know how many people I followed, but it was like, we were all in this group of people doing the functional medicine thing newly. That's how I felt, at least. I'm sure there were a million other people on there that I was not aware of. And it felt like there was just this smaller group, and maybe it was the algorithm. Maybe it's just because we saw all of each other's stuff. Yeah.
That right there, I think these were the days where Instagram just showed every single thing you posted on the feed in the order. And you would just like post what is stories now, like here's my healthy lunch. And we were doing like health stuff back then, predominantly. Then we're kind of like, okay, that you could just post, and anybody that follows you would actually get sent out that post. So in that process, this was also, this is how a while into it was Periscope earlier on. And that wasn't even at the very beginning, but that's back when this was like the Periscope days were super fun. I miss that. I know we got like Instagram lives instead from Periscope, but honestly, Periscope was just so much more fun. Like you would literally I would hang out there for hours. Like my ex-husband would be like, oh my God, when are we going to have dinner? I'd be like, just a little bit more Periscope. Please don't make me get off.
Wait, Alex, if anybody here is listening to this and you were back from the Periscope days and you're on there with us, please send us a DM on Instagram, because
seriously,
it was quite a community. We would hang out for hours.
Gosh. Yeah, we really would. Oh my gosh. Yeah, there was much fewer opportunity. Like you couldn't make a reel and a carousel and all this stuff. And so it was just that. And then the focus really was on sharing and commenting and interacting that way. So we were off doing that. And then after a while, I was like, man, I have seen this ginger nutrition everywhere. So I'm like, she's really on it doing all the same stuff I am.
This redheaded girl keeps showing up in my feed.
Yeah, basically. And then
and you were Dig Primal.
I was Dig Primal. It was the different is good. And I was basically like having some success with using I basically figured out I could go gluten-free and I was celiac, and that doing certain things in certain orders and repleting my gut and the lining and all of that, it was helping. And so, that was the primal piece. And I was like, I don't know, paleo seemed too specific. But I was like, I get primal is just like a catch-all. So, but really, I mean, that was kind of the content I was consuming. I was following like Wellness Mama back then.
Balance Bites.
Yeah, Liz Wolf. Yeah, we were just on that, so that's fun. Yeah, listening to like Amy Porterfield stuff for business. I think we were doing all of that stuff, so that's why I think we kept seeing each other not only in the functional medicine and the food space, but also in that other space. And yeah, so then what ended up happening was that I was on call in the hospital. It was at night, and I sent an email to Megan being like, hey, I keep seeing you. But then you had basically written me an email already, right? Like you had basically like drafted it or something like that, where we basically had the thought at the same time independently, and then initiated the interaction basically at the same time. And that's why we always say, like, following the cookie crumbs is kind of our deal, because stuff like this, we already have evidence of this. So it's like, while I have moments of doubt or where my faith falters, I can't deny stuff like this, like there is just magic and kind of whatever things that we call serendipity, but really it's like, are you getting something that you wanted? So, we basically crossed mid-air. And so by the next day we had emails to each other. They have since been immortalized into a puzzle that Megan is the owner of, and it has our picture and then the two emails side by side. And it's been completed a couple times now, right?
Oh yeah. It even got a little water damage. I had to glue it back together. I had to glue, and you get water in a puzzle, for that's if you do puzzles and then the layers come apart. And I was like, I was so upset about it because I was like, oh, it's a custom puzzle and it means so much. And Alex created it for me. And so I glued every layer back together and it still goes together. It's pretty awesome.
Nice. Yeah.
We even did it at our retreat this summer. The ladies got to look at our faces at night too.
Yeah. We're like, this is too much, Megan. No, just kidding. They didn't say that. But we certainly made the joke. And then, even, Nate, Megan's husband, sent me a text like, where did you get that? And I was like, why are you asking? But then I heard the backstory. So that was why. It was the water damage. But yes, I still actually have it. We could totally redo it if we needed to. But anyways, so we got emails, and then we decided to get on the phone. And then that phone conversation was like 2.5 hours long. Like we just kept talking about stuff and kept, like, basically by the end of that conversation, 2 hours later or a little bit more, we had a whole basically plan for being each other's affiliates and working together and joining forces. So much so that when Megan got off and worked with her business mentors at the time, they were like, you don't even know this girl. You tell that part of the story. I wasn't there for that. I just know
Well, I remember basically, I think you had said something like, well, I don't know if you ever want to do a webinar or something, we could do it together. And I was like, well, what are you selling? Right. I'm like, and you're like, I'm not selling anything at this point, right? You're being a doctor. So I was like, okay, so you just want to come and share your doctor functional medicine world on the webinar, and then I will sell my one-on-one. And we're like, great, that sounds great. Sure. It quickly shifted.
You don't know what you're doing, do you? But yes.
It quickly shifted, because then we did start, that was back in the day when I was running liver detoxes. And then we really quickly shifted out of that to create the program we ran together for however 8 years, Healthy Hormones. because we realized that there's only so fast you can go one-on-one. I think most people think like one-on-one is the only way to go because then it's customized for my health. But we actually found the opposite, because in one-on-one, then you're spending, I mean, I'm like, if I have to explain like lemon water or like adding salt or adrenal cocktail again, like I am going to want to pull my teeth out, right? Like it just felt like such a waste of time to be explaining that over and over, especially since now knowing what I know of where we've gone, is like, for me, the deeper, like the coaching and getting to like the deeper concerns and the mindset and the beliefs was what I love to do. So it was kind of soul crushing to be like, well, yep, you do. Yep, you actually do want to eat some carbs, and like going over that again and again, it just started to feel like, I don't think I'm actually helping as much as I could. Whereas when we created it in a group program, we could cover all the basics in videos, and it's like, go watch all those basics, because a lot of people are like already on board. And if it was new to them, cool. If it's not, skip it, and then spend the actual coaching sessions going much deeper and having a group. So I know this happened to me all the time. You come to the call and you're like, I don't really know. I don't really have anything going on. I don't really have any questions. And then the next person raises their hand and, oh, look, that's your exact question that you didn't even know you had. And then the group format, that always happens, right? It's just like the people show up and maybe whatever they're asking is always what you need to know. And then we started to see really fast results in that setting. So then it became less and less of the one-on-one. And like Dr. Alex said, our long-term goal is to help as many people as possible, and in a structure that is sustainable. Because right up front, I remember one of the things I said to you was like, hey, when we got more serious, we didn't even meet for a year, I think it was, in person. We ran a business together online. And I remember being like, hey, it's really important to me, and you all have heard this probably on the podcast, but it is really important to me that my goal is to be home with my kids in the summer. So like,
that was established super upfront. Yep.
Right. And so a lot of people wouldn't be on board with that. Right. And luckily from the very beginning, we had the whole concept of, let's actually design this how we want this. And what has to be in place to make that happen? Like, what has to run on automatically? What has to be recorded? How would that work? And so our structures allowed for both. It allowed for, now we do in-person trainings, but then there's also periods of time where we're not, and where there's recorded things or where there's group calls. And also just sharing that, because I want, no matter what you're doing, you listening in your life, start to think about, is it set up the way you want? And did you create that? Because I think even coming into something like an online business where there aren't necessarily rules, it's easy to fall into this is how you do it. You launch X times a year. You do this. You coach this many hours. It's all about hours. It's whatever. So that flexibility has been so important to us.
Totally. And I think that's where up front, I don't think we knew what we were doing, but I think as we have grown and transformed and changed, we've actually developed language structures for what happened. And I think to us, we were like, how do we adopt the identity of a unit? Because we have a shared business identity, we have shared values. Like, we've had sessions with people who have facilitated, values discussion and coming into agreement with that and wiring that into both our physical brains. Like, we really early on came into it with that view of, what do you need? What do I need? And how do we come to it together? And that has been a huge blessing, that we started off on that foot, because the way life goes is that life throws you curveballs all the time. And when there's a transactional relationship of, you do this for me, I do this for you, when the going gets tough, that gets real hard. But the team and the unit and the shared identity dynamic has always made that less of a concern. When Megan had a baby and postpartum or whatever, there was obviously time. She's like, when I got divorced, there was obviously time I took when, when we've had things going on all throughout. But that did actually start very early on with that discussion, like Megan being willing to be like, I know this isn't real common, but this is what I want. Are you down? And I was like, well, yeah, that actually sounds great. Like I hadn't even really thought of that, but I was still, 10 years ago, I was still like, yeah, I'm going to have kids and then I'll want to take summers off too. And I like that value. And like, that's what the level that we were having our discussion. So it was always values driven. Right. And so from that perspective, then we began to move as such. And then over time, that's where we got to deepen that dynamic even more, which is, I think, why people come up to us at events and they're like, oh, I didn't know if you guys were like actually friends.
Yeah.
Like we're cracking up there and they're like, you guys are like, you have inside jokes and stuff. Like you got that, there's a vibe there. And that's where we have found that our shared energy is most powerful. And that is because it has been intentionally woven together by us and really reinforced with the choices we continue to make. Like the summer just happened. Megan took the 6 weeks and she did that. And we talked when she's in the phone booth, which was just a dirt patch on the road. And that's, we were chilling and just talking about family stuff and whatever. And that, I don't know, I'm very grateful about that part. And I'm happy it started so early.
Same. Yeah. I just realized I didn't actually answer your question, or you started to say, what did the business coaches, what did they tell me? And so they were basically like, you just met this person, so maybe not jumping into business with them. Like very, very hesitant. And they were a partnership, like 2 women in a business partnership. And
like,
so,
sorry, Nicole.
Yeah, it's like they're like upfront, just very aware of like this is a lot. And it's funny because just at our recent 2-day event in Dallas, we had somebody kind of raise their hand and say, I forget what it was exactly, but it was something along the lines, but like, yeah, but you two have each other. So this transformation work must be easier. Is that kind of like the...
Yeah, it was like, I think we were talking about something. She's like, well, is that because you guys are together that you do that? And,
okay.
Resounding no, but...
Right. So that's what I heard. 50-50 chance of essentially the question was, is it because you have each other? And so we laugh about that because really, and I think this is why probably those business partners were a little bit like, hey, take it slow, is that the reality is having a business partner, it's like having kids or having a partner. You have someone directly in your face that's mirroring all your stuff back at you, like real time, really fast. So it's way harder because there's a process where we see this in our trainings where people like they'll get certified, now they're an NLP, they're trained in NLP or master practitioner, and then they're like, hey, I'll buddy up with somebody else. And really what's going on often is they're like, yeah, maybe that other person will do all that like sales stuff or marketing or whatever, like I don't want to do. And then I'll like just be the coach. And that's really common where like both people are a little bit like, well, yeah, ooh, I'll hide behind you.
And you get along because you have the same concerns. You have the same values of it's more important for me to hide than to help the world, right? Like that's a shared value. So you kind of come together on that. But when it's the identity of the business, if someone was like, would you like the identity to share to be playing small? Most people are like, no, I don't. Right. But you come together on that, so it feels cozy, it's fun, you like the person, you think they're cool, right?
Yeah. And then you both end up with launch COVID.
Oh, secondary gain, gotta love ya.
Right? 2 people, same belief, have a little bit of fear of putting themselves out there or whatever it is, and then all of a sudden there's a pattern, like we would get sick anytime we would be
I'd have a pain flare. Megan have a migraine. Oh, look, we're both down. Now nobody can step up.
Right.
It took us honestly a couple of years to catch on, which is why we're like, don't do what we did. Like we'll just tell you, you know what I mean? Like, we'll just share. We don't want people hodgepodging that kind of stuff. There's some stuff only you can figure out because you're the leader. So what do you want to create and how do you want to do it? That's all you. At the same time, the flip side is there's some things that some people have already figured out, like resources to get there is the no-brainer of you can acquire those. What you do with those resources will be up to you. And since that's the hardest part, then you might as well focus all your energy on making decisions on the hardest part, not the other stuff, right? And so we address these things because, you know, if you haven't watched yet, you'll hear perception is projection, that whole lovely mirror thing being held up really does play out. And it's good and bad because Megan and I also mirror to each other our best, right? We really do show each other like where our compassion lies, where how we make choices, how we choose to love people, what we choose to share, or, you know, vulnerability and the courage that we use to follow through on that. All of that is true. And we see that mirror as well. And all the limiting things are super in your face as well. And sometimes because each person's path for growth is a little bit different, than weathering the in between, like basically minding the gap. That was a recent episode. If you haven't heard it yet, check that out afterwards. But minding the gap is basically like, how do you navigate? How do you make a relatively smooth experience in a gap of waiting, in a transition time, in a period of uncertainty or unknown or whatever? And those things have translated directly into our business. So what's funny is that every time we've done something together and have learned from each other, it's always represented in the business. And as we tell this story, right, like part of our stuff is that. And then as we go into like, you know, we're transitioning from healthy hormones to health transformation accelerator, going more to the brain, and then even higher, zooming out past that with what we do now. Additionally to that, it's really informed by the fact that it's actually in the negotiation of a lot of these very important, vulnerable things that we develop the resources and frameworks to help people do that a lot easier than that, because sometimes you get lucky. Even though it's hard, we just work well together. Like, we love each other, we're compassionate, we're understanding with each other, we give each other a lot of leeway. We know that, and we trust that the person's giving it their all. Whatever we're seeing is what they got. Like, that's what they're doing with their transformation, because we're here on this planet to do this thing. So it's like, in that structure, we get to negotiate a lot of stuff, and then we get to disperse that out in the world. And what we really want is for people to run with that, customize it for themselves, and spread it even wider, so that it's not just, you know, what's our system and mimicking that, but making it work for everybody out in the world. And it's the way we think about it, it's the leaders that often are willing to do the heavier lifting like that, right? The behind the scenes talks and the communications and sharing and making decisions and being like, gosh, we don't know what to do, and we still got to make a call and do something. All of those things then begin to create help and begin to address a lot of what is happening. And so it's not easier, but at the same time, it's worth it, I guess, is the only real way to say that.
Mm-hmm. And not only are we mirrors for each other, but our every client and every group. And as we evolved into, you know, running different kinds of groups, where healthy hormones was really more focused on the physical body. And then we moved into like brain health and really kind of the belief side of it. And we're moving into different bodies. That's getting mirrored back to us as well. Mm-hmm. And I remember our, trainers saying, oh, you think you got a lot, get a lot of transformation when you come to a training? We'll just wait until you host a training. And it's
That's been true.
It has been more than true. I mean, literally just recently, I am actually, I think Alex said something about like lifting weights. I'm like physically needing to strengthen my body, emotionally needing to strengthen my body, mentally needing to strengthen my body, because I am noticing like the intensity of these trainings. It's like if there's a fire hose, right? And there's a lot of energy coming through it, we're the container. And if that hose is not strong, then we can't hold the container. And I am being pushed to my limits every single container. So I know it's like, okay, here I am ready to go to the next level. I'm like actually working out, and I mean physically, like lifting weights, so that my body will be strong for our next training. Mentally, we're doing the processes that we teach all the time, because everything that anyone's dealing with, we need to be able to not have our own stuff becoming it, not our own thoughts coming into it. We need to be there for their thoughts and their things. Emotionally, same deal.
Oh my gosh.
When someone's in their guilt and shame or crying in front of you, which they are in our trainings, we need to not be bringing in our own. And I'm super kinesthetic. So this is like a practice of like, hey, there's nothing wrong with feeling feelings. It's just that we are in the container holdings part of this. We are in the feel my feelings afterwards. And we have had to really, really expand our resources. So every resource that we have and that we've created has been because we have needed it. Like we have been like,
use it.
Whoa, right. That was a big one. Okay. What process? How am I going to go through this? This is kind of like what I did. This is kind of like what I worked, but how can we make an actual step-by-step process? And we are always creating these for ourselves. And then, it gets passed on to our trainings, because we're like when you're in that space where you're thrown off emotionally or energetically, or their thoughts are all over the place and you're having really anxious thoughts, it's a little bit harder to think of like, oh yeah, what do I do now? Whereas if you have the checklist, you go to the checklist and you're like, oh yeah, I do the process because I'm in something, and I need, us as trainers hosting 7-day trainings or 2-day trainings, like we need to be on for a long period of time.
Yeah. And it's a lot that to us is a value of not bringing in our stuff into somebody else's, because it's really not so much of our work is actually not about us. It's about facilitating transformation while not interjecting, not making yourself a need, not making yourself a source of authority, of reframes, of ideas, of soothing, right? Like in order to facilitate someone standing on their own, we can't take we can't process it for them. We can't always do that, because it sets them up for failure in the future, right? It's not because we don't care, but because we care so much that long term that care has to continue even when they're done paying you, right? That's where our integrity value plays out. And that's where we really have to do our own emotional processing work in order to see that and keep our eye on that, no matter what, no matter if someone's happy or unhappy or crying or, having a moment, whatever it is, our own trauma might get triggered. It doesn't matter. We need to do what needs to happen, and then we process it just like anybody else. So yeah, that all happened very organically because of how we were doing this. So yeah, from all that discussion of like values, it did kick off a good working relationship. And then there was a kind of into it, there was Paigey pregnancy and Paigey birth and Paigey postpartum. And so that's where for the first one, it was a ways into, I think we already worked together like close to 18 months or something like that. But that's when I flew to you, because it was like, okay, for a while, you're not going to be flying. And so we might as well just do something and make it happen. Because I think before then we were trying to be like, you'll fly to me, I'll fly to you. But yeah, that's what happened. And then so I flew there. I stayed for like 4 or 5 days. or something. And it kind of felt like we had already known each other. Like we just kind of, you picked me up from the airport, you brought me some snacks like you still do. And then, and then you, we went to your house and we just like worked on stuff. We made videos, we did stuff. And then, fun fact, I did stool testing at Megan's house. And if you've ever done stool testing, you know, it involves keeping poop in someone's freezer and stuff.
Great first meeting in person.
So super the intimacy factor.
Totally normal in the functional medicine world.
Totally, yeah.
Yeah, it's no thing. Sure. Here's a Tupperware.
Yeah, you're like, actually, I'm gonna finish off these dates real quick, then we can just rinse it out and it'll be no problem. So now when I see dates, I'm like, oh, hey, Maggie. No, I'm just kidding. But I do remember what the Tupperware actually was. So that's, or the container. So that's actually pretty funny.
It's anchored in there, huh?
Yeah, it's pretty anchored in there. I was like, this is a relative stranger. Oh, well. Yeah. Yep. So that's kind of the vibe. I don't know. I feel like that story kind of like accurately summarizes what the relationship was like early on. And then really, I think we became each other's like venting buddies. You know, the closer we got and the more we worked in business, I mean, we spent like probably 3 to 5 hours a day on the phone, like talking about everything. And we had a bunch of stuff in common in life. Like we dealt with the same problems, had the same annoyances day to day, like that kind of stuff. Like husband faces and things like that.
Yep.
And yeah, we would talk and talk and talk and talk and talk and talk. Now here's where it came in, where lo and behold, we come across a book called The Presence Process by Michael Brown. We've talked about this before, but essentially this book is like, the first part is the book, and then it's a 10-week program where you go through each section and you do the section for a week, and then you go on to the next one. And then like at the 6-week mark, you add in the baths or whatever.
Yeah, there's breathing in the beginning, and then
and the mantra, and then the baths start, maybe like 4 weeks in for another 6 or something like that. And that was when we discovered the world of thoughts tied to emotion. So that's when we were like, what the heck is going on? Like, we're reading this book about thoughts. We're having a bunch of ahas, like, what? Like, I think this, and then emotions that we hadn't really allowed ourselves to feel were happening. So the first 4 weeks, I distinctly remember we were like crying the whole time. And then we both switched to anger. We didn't have to, it's not that, I don't actually believe that we were like tracking each other because we were copying each other. I really think we had such similar stories with like people pleasing and being the good girl and that living the checkbox life, that like, it's funny how when we're like, what happens with one person tends to happen with everybody else, or others at least, like there's at least someone like you, is that we see that all the time. Everyone thinks they're super duper unique. And most people are trying to find their significance through their problems as opposed to significance through creating an impact in the world, which they also want to do, but that's harder to get to, right? So being like, well, my problems are unique is a way to meet your significance while not having to do that much, right? You're not on the hook for anything. So yay for you. So in that way, we really ended up, and then we were back to crying at like week 9. And then I think at week 10, we were like, I don't actually know what anything means.
Confusion.
Yeah, confusion. So we were like, cool. Now, what's interesting about that is that we promptly went and continued ignoring the feelings part after that. But what we did have was the understanding that the thoughts we thought mattered. That's how we started catching on to doing stuff like, getting sick every lunch, or we'd be like, it's time to make a decision in business or a personal one. And we're like, oh gosh, I just got really fatigued. It must have been that gluten cross-contamination. I should get off the call. Like, would literally come up. And now we're not doing it consciously, but that's the kind of thing that you're like messing around, right? At some point when you see it. And so we started noticing stuff like that. And that's kicked off a couple of years of all sorts of mindset work. At that point, we were finding the Eckhart Tolle's, the kind of Richard Dodd's kind of stuff, the manifestation world, like Abraham Hicks, Catherine Zankina, who's our friend now, Jim Fortin, early maybe, or like early him and late us to there. And then NLP, kind of finding ways to rewire the brain, because we understood the brain portion of it. We were just applying it to the physical body. How does your brain talk to your ovaries, your adrenals, your thyroid, your liver, your gut? All of that we were covering. And then we were like, but what happens then when those thoughts are tied to chemical messengers and we think them more than we can eat food or take supplements? And that's when that world began. I am also popping in to share a bit about our sponsors, Needed, as in thisisneeded.com. If you follow the link in the show notes, you'll be able to check out their products and get 20% off with the code ZESTY. But about them, so Needed is a company that was created and thought of by two women, so like Megan and I, and we relate a lot to their story of looking around and realizing things like, oh my gosh, there's so many people, especially women, reproductive age, who are on things like multivitamins and prenatals and stuff, and yet when we do testing, 97% of people, and this is across literature, have nutrient deficiencies. Why is the formulation like this? Why is this happening? What is occurring? And more importantly, what can we do about it? And that question is what they answered with products that have been researched to be formulated with the forms and the amounts and the quantities of things that can be utilized by the body in an efficient manner, in a way that actually gets to the end result without causing problems along the way. And so that's what they were looking at. And so we really, really appreciate their products. They have everything from a multi to a probiotic options, and even a men's line. And specifically, if you are reproductive age-ish, as in you know you want kids, or you have kids, or have grown multiple and are recovering, any and all of those people will find the line very, very applicable to them. But even if that's not you, they absolutely have products. So check those out. We're super grateful for the sponsors. We've been using the products ourselves as well, and we're really, really loving them. So back to the show.
Well, I feel like that's when the pattern, and I think, life will deliver a pattern for you when it's time, when it's transition time, right? Because at that point, I do remember having a decent amount of one-on-one clients, or we were, I think maybe through Healthy Hormones, they could have add on one-on-one.
Right. Yeah.
And there was a pattern of like the people doing all the things, I'm doing air quotes, but like all the things perfectly. Right. And the results or symptoms or autoimmune flares or whatever it was that was physically happening still like just did not line up it didn't line up with the lab work. It didn't line up with in my brain of like with all the things they're doing. It was just like, what the heck is happening? And it was kept happening in a row, where then we'd get into a deeper conversation and something really big would come out, something that happened to them earlier in life, some really strong emotion that they were holding on to or didn't allow themselves to feel, like, oh gosh, I could never do anger. Or there was just these patterns or beliefs around maybe just like being a good mom, if in like how much time they spent on themselves, they didn't think they deserved anything. Or often too, there were these patterns of old things like, well, this person thought that I needed to lose weight. And so if I do lose weight now, I'm like proving that they were right. And like, I don't want them to be right, but I do want my body to be different, but I don't want them to be right. And just very much in parts about it, back and forth. And I love them. I can call myself a mindset ninja, and I loved it back then. And I was really good at pulling that out. And then I was like, well, now what? Because I didn't have the tools yet to actually rewire the subconscious, change the belief. Awareness can do it for some people. Like just knowing it's there was enough to break through for some. And then for others, it was like, cool, it's all about my mom. Like, now what? Right? What do we do with that? And that was when NLP entered like my life for my personal transition. Because really, for those of you who've listened to my personal series on the podcast, and you've heard all the way from I have herpes to my husband having an affair, and just all the things that physically happened, and all the things that I was, he went to rehab, and just like everything that went into that. I needed tools for myself. Again, it was always about me first. It was like, I got to figure this stuff out, because I've forgiven consciously, and I still have some things. I still have some things I'm holding against him or against myself. And that was the shift. That was a really big shift. And then all the health stuff shifted immediately, even though I was dealing with forgiveness. And then all of a sudden, all those health symptoms are going away too.
Right.
And that was when I just think we were like, that whole 10-year goal we had of training practitioners, that needs to happen now. Like, we have something here that the world needs now.
And around that time too was then we hit the next level, which helped us identify, the 4-body framework that you see now, and what you'll be seeing more and more of as we go through the rebrand and, showcasing the upcoming identity that we have become and where we're going. Then we began to understand that the thoughts absolutely dictate then the behavior. And we began to see that oftentimes it was a thought that created an emotion that then set up the state of the body. And that was what drove behavior. So there was a step in between that wasn't being acknowledged. And when people, even in the NLP world, we hear people being like, well, you had the aha, so do the thing. And then some people can do it and some people couldn't. Some people could do it sometimes and sometimes they couldn't. So we were like, what's going on there? That is a little too inconsistent for a framework to be used comprehensively, right? If you're going to use certain things to explain everything, well, then I'd better explain the things, right? Then that's where we continue to zoom out. And because that thing often is, I can have a thought, if it makes me feel super duper bad about myself, it completely takes the gas out of my tank. And writing that email to pitch myself to a podcast, or pitching your, success habits thing in the DMs is going to be massively challenging. It's going to feel like an uphill battle. And even if you do it, sometimes people go to bed having reinforced feeling bad about themselves. They're like, I did it, but like, look how bad I did it. Look how bad I felt. That must not be normal. And so reinforcing the wiring, even though they're actually taking the good actions, right? Or taking the actions and then beating themselves up for it, whatever version of that it looks like. And so that was happening. And then sometimes it would be the opposite. You're going along, you're having a good day, you have the thought, and then you go and you do that, and it reinforces the part of you that's like, yeah, I got things. I can take action. I'm brave. That's cool. I can be courageous. And so that is where then seeing that and having some fairly negative experiences around that personally, then we began to start to say, this body, the emotions need to be resourced, right? If you can have 2 separate thoughts and have emotions linked to it, and you're making the choice of how to navigate this, well, then you need resources in order to navigate it. Kind of like if you're crossing a river, you probably need like a boat or a rope to hang onto, or something that is going to get you from where you are, which is, I don't really understand this part of myself, to what's going on here, what can I do about it, and how do I need to modify things based on different situations. So that part then had a couple years of development, although at this point, this is where we began to have a complete picture, because what we haven't been alluding to is that independent of this was a whole spiritual body development. So it started with, we had both kind of been like tangentially crunchy. Like we had gone to people like energy work. I remember my mom in high school taking me to this healer because I always had neck pain and headaches, and I had the endometriosis symptoms back then. And that was like going to, you know, energy work me and pray over me. And so I had exposure to that stuff. I also grew up with shamanism in Russia. So that kind of stuff. And Megan had her own experiences there. If you've ever heard us say spray my face, Gladys, that is from that is an inside joke from an energy healer that we got massages from, who had a spray. And well, actually,
I was trying to communicate with her telepathically that I needed her to spray my face because my throat was so dry, and I knew she read minds and thoughts. So I was
you were testing
over
her.
And over. Spray my face, Gladys. Spray my face, Gladys. So good.
Anyway, it's probably only funny to us, but that's what we're talking about. Yeah, so we started doing stuff like that. We started reading books. We read like the Surrender Experiment by Michael Singer. We had up all the Michaels apparently. You know, we were doing it, and that's where with the manifestation stuff, some of the soul purpose and the Dharma discussions and what's the vision of what we are accomplishing. That actually, it was interesting. It was like it was a separate track in our mind. Like it was behind a wall where we were doing this stuff, but it was outside of some of the business. And occasionally we'd bring it in. But at that point, once we hit the mental body, the thoughts, and then the emotions, and then we began to see how it interfaces with the like template for the physical body that's in the energetic body, the templates for the stored emotions that we've habitually had, all of that, all of a sudden we began to see like, oh wow, there is no distinction here for any of us. It's all just, this is the wholeness that you're made up from, right? It's all four bodies working in unison. The fewer walls there are inside, the more cohesive, unified, whole, and complete that you are. And your identity comes across like, this is who I am in the world. These are the decisions I'm making, and this is where I'm going. And that began to really become realized by us and lived out by us in a way where we like begin to embody it as of a couple years ago then. And that's where we had oh my gosh, we have something here that is not in existence before. No one has ever put together functional medicine, NLP, emotional work, and spiritual advancement and evolution together in the way that we have. No one has the same frameworks we do for things like how to talk to yourself, how to negotiate when you are conflicted about something, how to meet your own needs to ensure that you have what you need in the world, irrespective of anybody else. All of that really began to emerge, and we began to kind of circle back around to, this isn't just about health. This isn't just about relationships. This isn't just about feeling good about yourself. It's actually about the huge picture of, why am I here? Why are we all here? And where do we all want to go?
No small question.
No small question, right? And then this was the final step. This is where we're like, we're really talking about transformation here. Ours, everybody, someone else's, and the whole world. And then we kept having experiences. We just kept having so many mirrors in our face. And Megan and I invested in ourselves quarterly And that's just a thing that we have set. And so that might be a book, that might be a $30,000 mentorship. It just depends on what's going on. It depends on what our needs are and where we need the support. And so as we began to look at that, then we, shoot, I just lost my train of thought, explaining the
It'll come back.
investment thing. What was I saying?
I'll just tell dad jokes in the meantime.
No, but really, can you prompt me?
I'm lost with you. So
yeah, that's hilarious.
Okay, hold on.
No, it was about that. Well, yeah, if you have a dad joke, go ahead.
No. I'm actually just trying to.
Yeah, totally. Where I'm going with that is the advancement of putting it all together, I think, is in the application of the faster transformation, right? We realized our stuff wasn't just geared for transformation. When we looked around, we were like, yeah, actually, there's a bunch of people that can help you transform. And for one, we love Jim Fortin. He's awesome. We think he's great. We have there's a podcast episode on his podcast coming out soon that you can catch. It's with me. For us then, what we began to see in all those mirrors is that one thing that we continually deviated on was some of the narratives on expectations around time. And this took us a while because this was one of the things where it's like, there's just some givens out in the world. Like there's things like you have to be patient. Like you get what you need when the time is right. And a lot like surrender. And there's a lot of messaging. While we completely agree, like I believe it's important to surrender and be clear about who that you're talking about when you say that for you. We have to figure out what someone actually believes and thinks and how the world can make sense to them in that viewpoint, right? And so we began to see that while we could be patient at times, was that really the only narrative available? Like, do you get bonus points for patience, like extra patience, right? And that's where in the things that happen to us, we began to see where sometimes there is a waiting process and sometimes people are just sitting around waiting for something to happen to them and pissed that it's not. And on some level, that's where I say, if we have any impact, let's find where the opportunities are to speed up the transformation, the accelerator portion. And that's why we didn't rename and rebrand and stuff for a while after these concepts, because we were still kind of finalizing the wording around that, because essentially, if you can accelerate your transformation, most people want that, right? Like it took us 9 months instead of 10 years to do in-person retreats. I think most people would agree that think of any goal that you want, do you want it to take 9 months or 10 years? I don't know too many people that would say 10 years for anything, right? If it's a goal. And so maybe like kids growing up, right? Like I want it to take 10 years for the 10 years to pass. Like that's cool. But in other things, I don't want to, if I can work through some of my personal trauma in 9 months instead of 10 years, I'm absolutely going to do it. And we began to really actually stand on that because it was such a deviation from what you normally hear, all the Eckharts and the gurus and everything. A lot of the narrative is around see how it goes and and again, there's components of that are absolutely true and play out in our laws in the universe, and not everything fits that bill. Not everything is like that. Not everything requires you to wait for somebody else to give you the green light. And that was actually the kind of the final clicking piece, essentially, is that with that combination of everything, we knew we created and continue to create, because we're always creating new frameworks and teaching new things, something that doesn't exist, right? We don't really have to feel threatened or imposter syndrome. Like, I'm not trying to do things like other people, so what do I have an imposter syndrome about, right? There's nothing to apply it to. Nobody else is like me, so there's really nothing. I don't have a comparison. And because I don't have one, it doesn't open the door for the mental gremlins to come in there, right? I'm pretty confident you can't get that anywhere else. And that's cool, right? You want me, you get me, and you want Megan, you get Megan. There's nobody else like that. And so that is a lot of the case that we make is through the application of like creating your own evidence. You create an identity and a structure in a business that it has an unshakable foundation like that. The mean comments and the trolls, or your parents being like, I thought you'd make money by now. Are you sure you don't want a real job? All of that are then weathered. It's not that you don't register them. It's not that I don't hear the words. It's just that it doesn't really hit the same, right? It doesn't have the same emotional impact, because I'm kind of like, why do you think you know me better than me? Because I've spent my whole life figuring out who I am, and I'm still not even done. So I don't know on what planet you think you know me more than that, but I'm going to go ahead and reject that concept, right? That's not actually true.
And this is where we really reverse engineered, because we said, okay, now we have a bunch of success, and now we've worked with, hundreds, thousands of people over the years where we could see the patterns. We're really good at seeing patterns, and we would see the success. And that's where we decided we'd reverse engineer. And we're like, let's work backwards from all the things that worked, whether it was in health and overcoming pain, having celiac disease and now being able to eat gluten, or, me with my mold detox, or whether it's something like getting Byron Katie to be on the podcast, like wins that we had in business, hosting a retreat. We worked backwards and we said, what are the steps of what we did when we were successful? And that's when we got to our 7-step framework, which is the foundation of our Transformation Accelerator program. So that's our 12-week online group that we now run twice a year, which will be open next week. For those of you who've been in our Success Habit series, then you are getting a little taste for what that is and how that will be. That 12 weeks, we've noticed that in addition to the people who decide to come to our 7-day in-person practitioner training, because you can either come and get certified, get 4 certifications, or you can join us online. Either way, there's a framework that you can go to throughout the process for wherever you are. And you can take the framework, rinse and repeat over and over and over and over again. And like we said, we're always changing it to make it the fastest, to make it the most accelerated. We're like, okay, cool. That tapping thing worked, but actually when I did this other thing, that's when like I moved the emotion really quickly or whatever. And we're like, here's a bunch of examples. Of course, you have to customize to you which ones work for you. And the more people are willing to just test and try and all the different possible options and modalities in each of the steps, then the quicker they find like, ooh, this is my end. This is the one that works for me, that works for fast. And then they'll know their patterns. They'll like, oh, this is where I shut down. This is where I don't show up to a call, or this is where I turn off my video. This is where I shy away and call out our own patterns. This is where I
get pissed instead of being like, maybe that's a good point. Right.
Right. This is where I go, oh, I'm on step 4 and I throw up my hands. It's not working, instead of like following all the way through to 7. Like, where else in your life do you just stop at step 4? So then you get to see your pattern really clearly. The more open someone is to seeing their patterns, because we don't always want to see them, the faster we transform. And so
and it wasn't even the 7 steps that we did. One change of the 7 steps as we were developing that years ago now at this point. And then it has really stayed. And then underneath it, I mean, I continue to be floored at how many resources there are to not only find, but also develop. Like every conversation, just recently, I had a very organic, we're creating a framework around, parts, like conflict within yourself, right? And working on that and just having conversations with people I love about that kind of stuff and explaining things made me stop and go, oh wow, this is actually just this is a process that can be rinsed and repeated, and this can be done completely alone. And it was very, very cool. And it's always fun. Like creativity and the creation of something new that doesn't ever exist is always fun, at least to us. And in that regard, it's like that's where the identity begins to just be embedded, right? It's a product of who I am, that stuff comes into my mind and it is that clear. And for me, I get to see it, like it just drops into, I can see the sheet in my mind's eye and I just write that sucker down. Right. And those are the magical experiences that when I was back looking for confidence and self-worth, and I repeated statements to myself and I was like, if I feel that way, then I'll do this stuff. And instead, it's really, the reality is that it's absolutely flipped on those particular subjects, is that doing stuff like that reminds me of who I am. It's a self-reinforcing structure. And that's why we stick with it. We may falter, we may have a hard time, we might be out for the count for a couple of days, we might call each other and cry. But really, at the end of the day, even when we freak out and have a conversation, we always end with like, well, we're not going anywhere, so I'll talk to you next time. And that's fine. We all just go on with our days. Like there's no out anymore. There's really not, because this is who we are by choice. And if that ever changes, then that changes. But right now, that is what it is. And we're very clear about that.
Yeah. And we're here for all the leaders. We're here for the visionaries. Mm-hmm. We're here for the coaches, the practitioners, everybody who wants to help us transform the world faster, whether it's conventional medicine or the world of coaching. We need people in every area, people working with children.
Yeah. Because when that reproductive endocrinologist came in and said, oh, you're going into menopause and we got 6 months to do this, let's come up with a plan. That's where I think back and say, no one needs to go through this. The countless pain appointments that I had where I got handed ibuprofen or told I was crazy, or at best, handed an antidepressant, because they are used in chronic pain states conventionally, right? It was very limited and it felt awful. It reinforced so much of what it is. But when someone is helping you with the resources to address all those, the one problem you could have is, are you applying the resources? But it never again is a problem of not having them. And that's what we want. Free will has to exist. People have to make the decision to transform for themselves. No one else can do it for another person. And there's blessings in that. But at the same time, those experiences do not need to happen in that same way. They don't need to be set up. If we have leaders, practitioners, coaches who are equipped to support and hold the fullness of who someone is and however they want to offer how they work, then it really creates, think of how the effect it will have on medicine. The types of appointments we have, the kind of conversations that are had in there, the type of connections that are made between providers and patients, right? Those kind of things will deepen and become more loving, kind, compassionate, and probably more fun. Like, right, if your interactions with healthcare weren't always like, oh, here we go, it's going to be expensive, it's going to be crappy, it's going to take a long time, and they're not going to really help me. It's time to stop looking around and going, gosh, I wish someone would have fixed this. Like, it's so annoying that the world is like this. If you're saying it's time to consider, are you one of the people that's willing to get up and go do the thing to make it better? Because we really, really need that. And we don't know about you, but we want it like ASAP. You know what I mean? Like I don't want to keep having kids that have the same experiences I did growing up. I don't want to have coaching experiences like I've had and that we've had. I don't want to have health experiences or NLP experiences. Those things, we can do a more unified job in all of these areas and can very, very rapidly, like within a generation, transform multiple billion-dollar industries. Like coaching is a billion-dollar industry.
Yeah.
Transformation work and healthcare.
Mm-hmm.
And those are just the first three that we got our sights on. I mean, actually, I have to add business too, right?
Yeah.
And so in these scenarios, we are looking for people who are like, yes, that is what I want. I'm willing to not just talk about it. I'm willing to do the thing. I'm willing to show up, do the stuff, work on my life, be honest with myself, acknowledge the things I need to acknowledge, see the patterns, take the action, whatever it is. If that's you, then we're for you, right? You've come to the right place. Let us know and we'll get you plugged into whatever level you're at. But essentially that's how we see it. That's what makes the day in and day out and the year after year really possible, I think, for us.
Absolutely. That was quite the journey.
It really was. It felt like it too.
Yeah.
I'm excited to do like a 20-year.
I know.
We should watch ourselves. We should videotape ourselves listening to this.
That's a great idea.
And do
like, we thought we had our formula complete.
Right. Yeah, we definitely don't. Yeah, the lifetime endeavor is, I mean, what's funny is, I think this is where the patience does become a bit of a goofy thing because it's a good reminder of people like, I want to be like my complete evolution, but most of the time that's kind of towards the end. So are you really speeding up? What are you really speeding up and which time would you like to cut back on? Right. There's some real ramifications in with that statement. So we can certainly all in that regard appreciate the journey, knowing that as we interface with the people we need to interface with and have these experiences, it really is the bumper lanes on becoming more of who we want to be and feel proud being and really is in line with our purpose in the world.
Absolutely. Well,
yep.
If you're here and you made it all the way to the end, I mean, definitely congratulate yourself on that. Yep. I'm impressed. And if you haven't listened to our Success Habit series, go on over now because part 3 is coming out tomorrow live. So becomingzesty.com/success. And as always, come on over to the gram, find us there.
Yep.
Becoming Zesty over there.
Or shoot us an email, support@becomingzesty.com. Any questions that you have?
We love your questions. We love suggestions for future episodes or anything you're loving. So we really, really appreciate you being here, and we can't wait to have you in our world more.
All right. Talk to you soon.
We have some exciting news. Doors to the next round of our signature Transformation Accelerator program are opening soon. Our 12-week virtual group program teaches you the exact 7-step process that we use to reach any goal, from optimizing your health all the way to reaching a goal in our business or manifesting a dream lake house. And here's an amazing transformation story from one of our participants.
If you are anything like I was, you think about your body a lot, almost all the time. You worry about what it looks like, what it feels like, what it looks like to other people. Is it too big? Is it too small? Everything is focused on your body. That's how I used to move through my days. was obsessed with how I looked and how I felt. And were people judging me? Was I judging myself? And the biggest gift that I got a lot of gifts, but the biggest gift that I got from taking part in the Transformation Accelerator coaching program was the ability to remove those false negative beliefs and decisions that I've had about myself and my body. Freeing me from that allowed me to release weight that was no longer serving me, but also changed my view of myself. I no longer hold that as the main point of who I am. It's part of me, and I'm calm and comfortable and confident in my body now. And I hope and wish that for everybody. Taking part in that program allowed me to be able to refocus my mind, refocus my day, because we're all human. And even though I cleared a lot of negative and unwanted beliefs and decisions that I held about myself, sometimes they creep back up. But that's the other part of the program, is you leave with tools that help you daily to stay on your track, to believe in yourself, to have confidence, and to move through your world with calmness, confidence, and comfortability. It's what I wish for you.
Thanks for coming to hang out with us on the podcast. It is our goal to lead others through accelerated transformation that takes all parts of ourselves into account. And we need your help. We need your help to get the word out. At almost 2 million downloads and quickly heading to 3, we know that as this podcast grows, we're going to be able to reach more and more people and help them learn how all 4 bodies, physical, mental, emotional, and energetic, work so they feel empowered to be, do, and have whatever they want in life.
If you find this podcast helpful, please take a moment to text 5 friends you think might benefit and leave us a review. It means so much to share this work that has transformed our lives with others. We appreciate your help so much and can't wait to see you next time.